There is a specific kind of silence that falls in a meteorological observation room when a number appears on a screen that has never appeared before. The instruments do not react differently. The software does not celebrate. The thermometer at Kew Gardens, a botanical garden in southwest London that has been recording weather since 1697, making it one of the longest continuous meteorological records in the history of science, simply read 34.8 degrees Celsius on the afternoon of Monday, May the 25th, 2026. And with that reading, in the space of a single afternoon on a bank holiday Monday in what is supposed to be a temperate island, 329 years of May temperature history were rewritten, not nudged forward by 1/10 of a degree, not incrementally extended by the margin that separates one warm year from the next. Rewritten by 2 full degrees, in a single day, in a month that had been dealing with snow on Scottish mountains less than 2 weeks before. The previous record had stood since 1944, 82 years. It was set on the 29th of May that year, the same month that D-Day was being planned at military headquarters across Britain, the same month that Allied forces were massing across the south of England for the invasion of Normandy. The temperature that day reached 32.8 degrees Celsius, recorded simultaneously at Camden Square in North London, at Regent's Park, and at Tunbridge Wells in Kent. For 82 years, through every summer heatwave, every warm bank holiday, every record-breaking July and August that Britain experienced across the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st, the 32.8-degree May reading held. The 2019 heatwave that set a new UK all-time record of 38.7 degrees did not touch it. The 2022 event that pushed the all-time record above 40 degrees for the first time in British history did not touch it. May is spring. May has its own records. And May's record, the one that held through everything, was 32.8 degrees. On May 25th, 2026, Kew Gardens reached 34.8 degrees Celsius. The Met Office posted on X within minutes of the reading being confirmed. Today has been the hottest day in May on record, with Kew Gardens provisionally reaching 34.8 degrees Celsius, exceeding the previous highest May temperature. They added the sentence that this heat would be exceptional in the UK, even in midsummer, let alone in May. That sentence is important. It is not the language of an organization that hedges its assessments. It is the language of an institution that has spent decades communicating carefully about climate risk, and that is now, in the face of a temperature, reading that exceeds what mid-July normally produces in England, simply telling the truth as directly as the data requires. The chief operational meteorologist, Dan Surrey, described what the data was showing. The influence of warmth building under an area of high pressure near the UK, allowing exceptional heat to build to allow maximum and minimum temperature records to be broken. What that technical description translates to in plain language is this. The atmospheric setup was not extraordinarily unusual by the standards of European summer circulation patterns. It was the temperature of the air the setup was working with that made the difference. The air was hotter than any previous May air mass that has passed over Britain in the entire history of systematic temperature measurement. The sequence of records that Kew Gardens set across May 2026 deserves to be understood as a progression rather than a single event, because the shape of the records breaking tells you something important about how the month unfolded. On May 1st, the first day of the month, Kew Gardens recorded 29.3 degrees Celsius, the hottest 1st of May in the history of the UK record, breaking the previous mark of 27.4 degrees set at Lossiemouth in Scotland in 1990 by nearly 2 degrees. That record, notable in its own right, received significant news coverage at the time. London was hotter than Athens, Cairo, Marrakesh, and Los Angeles on that day. Then, 3 weeks later, it was rendered almost quaint by the context of what followed. On May 23rd, the UK recorded its first 30-degree reading of the year, the earliest such reading since 1952, and the first time in 74 years that the thermometer had crossed that threshold so early in the calendar year. On May 24th, Kew reached 32.3 degrees, on the hottest May day in at least 79 years. On May 25th, it reached 34.8. And on May 26th, it reached 35.1 degrees Celsius, breaking the record set less than 24 hours before. Kew Gardens broke the all-time UK May temperature record twice in 2 consecutive days. Each time it did, it was not beating a reading from a previous year, it was beating a reading from yesterday. The global media reaction to the 34.8 degree reading on May 25th was immediate and extensive in a way that reflects how unusual the world's meteorological community considered the event. CNN covered it within hours with language that captured the scientific community's response precisely, using the phrase mind-bogglingly crazy, attributed to a leading climate scientist watching the European temperature anomalies in real time. The Weather Atlas published a dedicated analysis noting that the heat dome was delivering midsummer heat well ahead of schedule, with temperatures soaring 12 to 16 degrees Celsius above long-term climatological norms, a level of departure from seasonal averages that, as they noted, is staggeringly high for late May. Reuters, AFP, AP, and every major broadcast network in Europe ran the Kew Gardens, reading as a primary news item. The image that accompanied much of the coverage, a weather map of England showing the temperature gradient with Kew Gardens in the southeastern counties in the deep, saturated colors that normally represent the hottest days of August, became one of the most shared weather graphics in the history of British meteorological reporting. The international framing of the 34.8 degree reading extended far beyond Europe. Vietnamese newspaper Lao Dong ran the story. Indian media covered it alongside their own country's concurrent heat stroke deaths. Australian meteorologists commented on the May timing as particularly striking, given that Australia was simultaneously moving into its autumn and winter, creating a jarring global temperature contrast. American weather networks drew comparisons to the Pacific Northwest heat dome of 2021, which had briefly pushed temperatures above 49 degrees Celsius in parts of Oregon and Washington, events that, like the Disinformation UK's May 2026 readings, sat so far outside the historical range that some meteorologists initially questioned whether the instruments were functioning correctly. They were functioning correctly. The climate had simply moved. What the 34.8 degree reading meant on the ground at Kew Gardens itself, at the garden where the measurement was taken, was visible in the photographs that news agencies published alongside the temperature data. Kew Gardens, which normally attracts visitors for its plant collections and glasshouses, was packed with people seeking any available shade. The iconic Palm House glasshouse, designed to replicate tropical conditions, was reportedly warmer outside on Monday afternoon than inside, because the glasshouse's climate control systems were designed to maintain tropical temperature ranges that the external air had now exceeded. The irony was not lost on climate scientists. A building constructed in 1848 to create artificial tropical conditions for plant conservation had become, on a May bank holiday in 2026, the cooler option. The human cost of the day the record fell was not abstract. The same ITV News report that confirmed the 34.8 degree reading included a detail that sits alongside the temperature data, as a reminder that meteorological records have human consequences. Lincolnshire police reported that a 15-year-old boy named Declan Sawyer was recovered from the water at Swanholme Lakes in Lincoln, after being reported in difficulty at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon. The combination of extreme heat and cold water that the RNLI had specifically warned about, air temperatures near 35 degrees above a water body whose surface temperature remained far below that, created exactly the conditions associated with cold water shock fatality. The record temperature and the drowning death occurred on the same afternoon. They are the same story told from two different directions. One direction is the atmospheric physics of a heat dome. The other is a 15-year-old boy who went to a lake to cool down on the hottest May Day in British history and did not come home. The water supply failure that accompanied the record temperature revealed another dimension of the infrastructure, unpreparedness, that the climate change committee had documented in its report, published 5 days earlier. Southeast Water apologized after it had to hand out bottled water to customers in Kent and Sussex. Around 250 properties in 3 Kent villages experienced intermittent water outages or low pressure. 500 properties supplied by Southeast Water were affected in total by issues, including outages and reduced pressure during the peak heat period. This was not a coincidence. Water demand spikes dramatically during extreme heat events as people fill paddling pools, water gardens, take additional showers, and increase their fluid intake. Supply networks designed for normal seasonal demand do not have the spare capacity to absorb that spike without pressure drops in the most peripherally served areas. The areas of Kent affected on May 25th were served by aging pipe infrastructure whose operational design assumptions did not include routine bank holiday heat events producing temperatures approaching 35 degrees Celsius. The overnight record that fell on the same day as the 34.8 degree reading adds a dimension to the May 25th event that is less visible than the daytime peak, but has its own significance. The temperature at Kenley Airfield in Surrey did not fall below 21.3 degrees Celsius overnight on the night of May 25th to 26th, making it what meteorologists define as a tropical night, an overnight minimum above 20 degrees. Tropical nights are the marker of a heat event that is genuinely dangerous rather than merely uncomfortable, because the human body's ability to recover from daytime heat stress depends on overnight cooling. When the night temperature does not drop below 20 degrees, the body cannot fully dissipate the heat accumulated during the day. People in buildings without mechanical cooling, which describes the overwhelming majority of British homes, experience rising internal body temperatures across successive nights of a prolonged heat event. The first tropical night in May in the history of the UK record occurred on the same night that the daytime record fell. The climate attribution context for the 34.8 degree reading was provided by the Met Office in its official statement on the event, and the specific numbers are worth repeating clearly. A climate attribution study published by Met Office scientists in 2025 found that breaking the 32.8 degree May record, the record that 34.8 exceeds by 2 full degrees, is now around 3 times more likely than it would have been in a natural climate without greenhouse gas emissions. What was approximately a 1 in 100 year event has become approximately a 1 in 33 year event. And the Met Office noted the broader statistical significance with a fact that, assembled plainly, captures everything about the trajectory of British temperature records. If confirmed and validated, the May 2026 daily record would mean that more than half of the 12 monthly record highs, 7 out of 12 months, have been set since 2003. The majority of Britain's monthly temperature records have been broken in the 23 years since the beginning of this century. The rate of record breaking is not a random distribution across the 142-year observational history. It is concentrated in the recent past, accelerating and pointing in one direction. More than 350 French towns recorded their highest ever temperatures for May on the same day that Kew Gardens recorded 34.8. The Guardian reported that France and the UK had set national heat records simultaneously amid what it described as an extreme early summer heat event. The synchronized nature of the record breaking across a continent, country after country on the same day, all driven by the same heat dome, all producing readings that sat at the extreme end or beyond the extreme end of their respective national May distributions, is the global media story that the 34.8 degree Kew Gardens reading belongs to. It is not the story of one thermometer in one garden in one city in one country. It is a single data point and a planetary signal. The agricultural consequences of the day the record fell were felt across the same southeastern counties that recorded the highest temperatures. Tomato crops in Kent and Essex glasshouses experienced heat stress that disrupts pollination above 35 degrees Celsius, the precise threshold that multiple locations approached or crossed on May 25th. French agricultural scientists specifically noted that pollination of crops, including tomatoes, would be very severely disrupted in the southwest of France at these temperatures, a warning that applies with equal force to the glasshouse horticulture of southeastern England. Soft fruit growers in Kent, whose strawberry and cherry orchards had already been stressed by the Arctic blast of May 12th and 13th, faced compound damage from heat-induced fruit splitting and accelerated. Repeating that reduces both shelf life and market value. The agricultural calendar that southeastern England's growers operate on was designed for a climate where late May temperatures rarely exceeded 25 degrees. When the thermometer reaches 34.8, the assumptions of that calendar break as completely as the temperature record itself. The instruments at Kew Gardens, which have been reading weather since the 17th century, produced a number on May 25th, 2026, that had never appeared in 329 years of observation. The number was 34.8, and the day after that number appeared, it was exceeded. Both readings now sit in the record books, side by side, separated by 24 hours, 2 degrees above anything that month had ever produced. History was made on Monday. It was made again on Tuesday. And the thermometer at Kew Gardens, which has no opinion and no agenda, simply recorded what the atmosphere delivered